My name is Angelique, and at 34, I built a successful real estate empire from nothing. Growing up with barely enough to get by, I worked tirelessly to create financial security. When my parents faced foreclosure last year, I bought them a $400,000 house outright. I thought it would bring us closer. Then came the text that shattered everything. "You are not coming on the cruise. Dad wants just family," the cruise I had paid for entirely. I stared at my phone, numb with disbelief. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and stay for a story about standing up to family betrayal that will leave you speechless." I grew up in a faded blue colonial house in a lower middle-class neighborhood just outside Boston. Our home always seemed to be falling apart in some way. A leaking roof, one winter broken furnace the next. My parents, Diana and Martin, lived paycheck to paycheck with the constant stress of financial instability hanging over our family like a dark cloud. Diana, my mother, worked as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company. She was always impeccably dressed, despite our limited means, prioritizing appearances above comfort or practicality. She had a way of controlling every situation, her voice rarely raised, but her words sharp enough to cut through steel. My younger sister Brittany was her clear favorite from the moment she was born. "Brittany has my eyes," she would say, stroking my sister's blonde hair while I stood in the background. My darker features a constant reminder that I took after my father's side of the family. "And she has my artistic talent." My father, Martin, worked at the post office, coming home exhausted each day, only to retreat to his recliner with the newspaper and later a beer or two. He was a gentleman, kind in his quiet way, but utterly incapable of standing up to my mother. Whenever tension rose between Diana and me, he would simply sink deeper into his chair, eyes fixed on whatever he was reading. "Your mother means well," he would tell me later in private. "She just wants what is best for you girls." But he never intervened when Diana criticized my grades despite my straight A's or when she dismissed my ambitions as unrealistic. From an early age, I understood that I would need to forge my own path. I started babysitting at 12, tutoring other kids in math by 14, and working retail jobs throughout high school. Every dollar I earned went into a savings account for college. Diana frequently borrowed from my sister Brittany, but somehow knew better than to ask me. Perhaps she recognized the determination in my eyes, the silent promise I made to myself that I would build something substantial, something that could never be taken away. College was a struggle of student loans, part-time jobs, and exhaustion, but I graduated with a business degree and immediately set my sights on real estate. I started small, working for a property management company, while learning everything I could about investments, market trends, and flipping houses. My first property was a disaster, a tiny one-bedroom condo with water damage and electrical problems, but I renovated it myself over 6 grueling months and sold it for a $15,000 profit. That was the beginning. By 28, I had my own real estate investment company. By 30, I was managing properties across 3 states. The financial security I had craved my entire life was finally mine, built by my own hands and fueled by the desire to never feel as powerless as I had in my childhood home. I moved to Chicago for business opportunities, but the distance from Boston served another purpose as well. Space from my family dynamics gave me room to breathe, to become fully myself without the constant undercurrent of criticism and comparison. Still, I called home weekly, sent gifts on birthdays and holidays, and visited 3 or 4 times a year. Some deep part of me still longed for their approval, still believed that if I achieved enough, they might finally see me. 2 years ago, something shifted. Diana had health problems, a cardiac scare that landed her in the hospital for 3 days. I flew back immediately, sitting in uncomfortable hospital chairs and managing the insurance paperwork, while Brittany, now a struggling artist with 2 children and a husband, who drifted between jobs, called daily but never visited. It was during this time that my father and I reconnected somewhat. Shared coffee in the hospital cafeteria became a small ritual, a space where his usual passivity gave way to actual conversation. "You have done well for yourself," he told me one morning, stirring sugar into his coffee with unusual focus. "I always knew you would." Those words, simple as they were, felt like water in a desert. Perhaps sensing my reaction, he reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. I should have said it sooner. After Diana recovered, something had changed. The weekly calls included actual questions about my life. My birthday present came with a card in my mother's handwriting that said, "We are proud of you." When I visited, Diana still made her little comments about my clothes or my work schedule, but they lacked their former sting. I began to hope that perhaps age had softened her, that perhaps we could build some version of the relationship I had always wanted. It was this hope, this fragile bridge being constructed between us, that led to my fateful decision last year, when Martin called to tell me they were facing foreclosure on their home. After decades at the post office, his pension was not covering their expenses. Diana had retired early due to her health, and their savings had been depleted by medical bills. "We will figure something out," he said, but the defeat in his voice was unmistakable. "Maybe a smaller place." I knew then what I wanted to do, what I could do. I had the means to solve this problem permanently, to provide them security and comfort in their retirement years. And perhaps, just perhaps, this grand gesture would finally heal the wounds of the past. "Dad," I said, "let me help, please." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that I thought we might have been disconnected. Then I heard a sound I had never heard before. My father was crying. The decision to buy my parents a house was not one I made lightly. I consulted with my financial advisor, Jessica, who had become a close friend over years of working together. "You can afford it," she said, reviewing my portfolio, "but are you sure this is what you want to do? $400,000 is significant even for you." I was sure. The thought of my parents, particularly my father, facing housing insecurity in their 60s was unthinkable. And truthfully, part of me saw this as a chance to finally earn the place in my family I had always been denied. I flew to Boston the following week and took my parents to lunch at their favorite seafood restaurant, where I presented them with my proposal. I would buy them a house wherever they wanted, up to $400,000. The relief and shock on their faces was immediate. "We could move somewhere warmer," my mother said, her eyes wide with possibility. "Florida, maybe? My cousin Loretta lives in Naples." My father reached across the table and squeezed my hand, unable to find words. That simple gesture told me everything I needed to know. This was the right decision. The house hunting process took 2 months. My parents decided on Florida, and I traveled with them for a week to look at properties. Diana had specific requirements. A pool was essential, as was a guest room for Brittany and her children to visit. The neighborhood needed to be respectable, which I came to understand meant predominantly white and upper middle class. I bit my tongue and focused on the joy this gift would bring. We found the perfect place in a gated community near Naples. A 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom ranch-style home with a screened lanai and pool, walking distance to a community center with tennis courts and a small golf course. At $385,000, it was under budget while meeting all their criteria. "It is smaller than I expected," Diana commented during our final walkthrough, her gaze lingering on the modest kitchen. "Mom, it is 1,500 square feet. Just for you and Dad," I reminded her gently. "It is perfect," my father interjected, a rare moment of him directly contradicting my mother. "More than perfect, it is a dream." I handled the paperwork, putting the house in my name with the intention of transferring ownership once they were settled. My attorney advised this approach to avoid potential gift tax complications and to ensure the property would never be vulnerable to any debts my parents might incur. The closing day was emotional. I handed my parents the keys over dinner at a waterfront restaurant, having arranged for a local photographer to capture the moment. Diana actually hugged me, something so rare that I stiffened in surprise before melting into her embrace. "Thank you, Angelique," she whispered, and for once I heard genuine warmth in her voice. "This is more than we ever dreamed of." Over the next month, I helped coordinate their move, flying back and forth between Chicago and Florida. I hired movers, arranged for their Boston home to be sold, and helped them shop for new furniture. Each weekend spent with them felt like building something new, something I had craved my entire life. Diana was more relaxed than I had ever seen her, already talking about joining the community book club and taking water aerobics classes. During one shopping trip for living room furniture, she linked her arm through mine as we walked through the showroom. "You have a good eye," she said after I suggested a sectional that would maximize their space. "You always did have a sense for these things." Small moments like these accumulated, creating a sense of connection I had never experienced with her before. Even when Brittany visited for a weekend and brought her usual cloud of chaos and demands, Diana seemed to include me in a new way, consulting me about financial decisions and asking my opinion on home maintenance issues. The housewarming party was a small affair, just my parents, Brittany and her family, and a few of my parents' friends who had also relocated to Florida. I flew in with gifts, a top-of-the-line grill for my father, and an elegant patio set that Diana had admired. The afternoon was filled with laughter, good food, and a sense of possibility that made my chest tight with hope. That evening, after everyone else had left, I sat with my parents on their new lanai, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. My father poured us each a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "And to our amazing daughter who made this possible." My mother clinked her glass against mine. "We are blessed," she said. And though the words were simple, they felt like the acceptance I had sought for decades. Later that night, as I was preparing to leave for my hotel, Diana stopped me at the door. "We should do a family trip," she said suddenly. "The four of us and the kids. Maybe a cruise." "That sounds wonderful," I replied, surprised and delighted by the suggestion. "I will look into options," she continued. "Your father and I always wanted to see Alaska." I drove to my hotel that night feeling lighter than I had in years. The money spent, the time invested, all of it seemed worth it for this new chapter in our relationship. I fell asleep imagining us all on the deck of a cruise ship, finally a real family. What I did not know then was that Brittany had been on the phone with Diana immediately after I left, voicing her resentment about my showing off with the house purchase. I did not know that the seeds of what would happen next were already being sown. I was too caught up in the fantasy of finally being accepted to see the reality that was forming behind the smiles and thank yous. The idea of an Alaskan cruise quickly became a concrete plan. My mother called me with increasing frequency, discussing options and itineraries. I suggested we time it to coincide with their 40th wedding anniversary in July, making it a dual celebration. Diana loved the idea, and soon we were deep into planning mode. I found a perfect cruise package, I told her during one of our calls in March. 10 days starting in Seattle and going all the way up to Glacier Bay. They have these amazing suites with private balconies. "That sounds expensive," Diana replied, a note of hesitation in her voice. "My treat," I said immediately. "Consider it an anniversary gift." There was a pause on the line. "You do not have to keep spending money on us, Angelique." "I want to. I can afford it, and you both deserve this experience." Another pause. "Well, if you are sure, we would need 3 cabins, one for us, one for you, and one for Brittany and her family." "Of course. I will book the best ones available." I spent that evening researching cruise lines, comparing amenities and itineraries. I wanted this to be perfect, a trip they would remember for the rest of their lives. I settled on a luxury line known for its exceptional service and spacious accommodations. The price for 3 premium suites came to just over $20,000, not including flights to Seattle. I booked it without hesitation, sending the confirmation details to my mother the next morning. Her response was lukewarm. "Looks nice. The kids might be bored though." I added specialty excursions for everyone, including supervised activities for my niece and nephew. I arranged for a private anniversary dinner for my parents. I even booked pre-cruise hotel rooms in Seattle so we could explore the city before boarding. As the departure date approached, I noticed subtle shifts in our interactions. My mother began excluding me from certain planning discussions, calling Brittany directly instead of including me in group texts. When I mentioned buying special outfits for the formal nights on board, Diana made a comment about me always needing to show off. "I just want us all to have photos we will treasure," I explained. "Some of us do not have your budget for designer clothes," she replied sharply. "I was going to treat everyone to new outfits," I said, confused by her tone, "as part of the gift." "Always the generous one," she said, in a way that somehow made generosity sound like a character flaw. "Some things cannot be bought, Angelique." These moments increased in frequency as July approached. During a video call to discuss shore excursions, Diana repeatedly deferred to Brittany's preferences, while dismissing my suggestions. When I mentioned my excitement about us all having dinner together each night, Diana mentioned that Brittany's children needed early meals and bedtimes. "We will probably split up most evenings," she said. "Family needs should come first." The word family stung in a way I could not quite articulate. Was I not family too? My father remained his usual passive self throughout these interactions. When I called him privately to ask if everything was all right, he assured me that my mother was just stressed about traveling. "She appreciates everything you are doing," he said. "She just shows it in her own way." 1 month before the cruise, I flew to Florida to deliver the final documents and travel details. I brought specialized cold weather gear for everyone, knowing Alaska could be chilly even in summer. I had chosen thoughtfully, selecting items in each person's favorite color or style. Diana barely looked at the jacket I had brought her. "I already bought one," she said, showing me a basic raincoat that would be inadequate for glacier viewing. "This one is waterproof and has thermal lining," I explained. "The temperatures near the glaciers can drop into the 40s even in July." "I do not need you telling me what to wear," she snapped. "I managed to dress myself for 65 years before you decided to play benefactor." I stepped back, stung by her tone. My father interceded, admiring his new jacket and thanking me profusely. The moment passed, but left a residue of tension that lingered throughout my visit. That evening, I overheard Diana on the phone with Brittany. I had stepped out onto the lanai for some air, but froze when I heard my name. "Angelique is being overbearing as usual," my mother was saying. "Everything has to be her way because she is paying. I am about at my limit with her showing off." I moved quietly back inside, my chest tight with hurt and confusion. That night in my hotel room, I called Jessica. "I do not understand what is happening," I told her. "It is like the more I give, the more resentful they become." "Some people cannot accept generosity gracefully," Jessica replied. "It makes them confront their own inadequacies. But I am not trying to make them feel inadequate. I just want to give them experiences they could not otherwise have. I know that, but they might see it differently. Particularly your sister, from what you have told me about her." The final week before the cruise was filled with an increasing sense of dread. Diana became increasingly short with me on our planning calls. She questioned every decision I had made, from the cabin locations to the dining reservations. When I emailed everyone the final itinerary, Brittany replied with several changes she wanted made, copying only my mother on the response. I made the adjustments without complaint, telling myself that the tension would dissolve once we were actually on the beautiful ship surrounded by stunning scenery. This was just pre-travel stress, I reasoned. It would all be worth it when I saw their faces as we sailed past our first glacier or spotted whales from our private balconies. 3 days before we were set to fly to Seattle, I received a final confirmation email from the cruise line. I forwarded it to everyone with a message expressing my excitement about our upcoming adventure together. Brittany replied almost immediately, "Cannot wait. This is going to be the best family trip ever." The emphasis on family gave me pause, but I brushed it aside. I finished packing, arranged for my assistant to handle any work emergencies while I was away, and went to bed early, setting my alarm for my morning flight to Florida. I would spend one night with my parents before we all flew to Seattle together. I fell asleep, imagining the trip ahead, completely unaware that by this time tomorrow, everything would change in ways I could never have anticipated. The text message came at 6:15 the next morning, just as I was preparing to leave for the airport. My phone chimed with the special tone I had assigned to my mother's messages, and I glanced at it, expecting last-minute coordination details. Instead, I read words that stopped me cold. "You are not coming. Dad wants just family. We need this time with Brittany without your drama." I stared at the screen, certain I had misunderstood. I immediately called my mother, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the right buttons. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cool and collected. "Yes." "Mom, what is this message about? What do you mean I am not coming?" "Exactly what it says," she replied. "We have decided this should be a family trip. Just the 4 of us and the children." "But I am family," I said, my voice cracking, despite my best efforts. "And I booked this cruise. I paid for everything." "Yes, you have made that abundantly clear at every opportunity." Her tone was bitter. "Everything is always about your money, is it not? How much you have, how much you can give us." "That is not fair," I whispered. Life is not fair, she replied. The tickets are in our names. The reservations are made. You can get a refund on your portion. Can I please talk to Dad? A pause, then my father's voice came on the line. Angel. He had not called me by that childhood nickname in years. Dad, what is going on? Mom says, I am not invited on the cruise anymore. Your mother thinks it would be better this way, he said, his voice lacking its usual warmth. There has been a lot of tension, and with the kids. Did you tell her you just want family? Those were her words. A long pause. We need this time with Brittany and the children. You understand, do not you? You are so busy with your life, your success. They need us more right now. The words hit like physical blows. I sat down on the edge of my bed, suddenly unable to stand. I planned this whole trip, I said. I paid for everything. The cruise, the flights, the hotels. Even the spending money I transferred to your accounts last week. And we appreciate that, he said quickly. We do. But maybe this is for the best. You can take some time for yourself, relax. Without family obligations. Family obligations. As if I were an obligation, a burden rather than a daughter. Put Mom back on, I said, my voice flat. When Diana came back on the line, I asked the question burning in my throat. Was this the plan all along? To let me pay for everything and then exclude me? Do not be dramatic, she replied. This decision is best for everyone. We will call you when we get back. The call ended and I sat motionless, still holding the phone to my ear as if more explanation might come through the silence. My phone chimed again. A text from Brittany. Finally. Some real family time. Without you making everything about yourself. Thanks for the free vacation, though. Something broke inside me at those words. I curled forward, physical pain radiating through my chest as sobs tore from my throat. All the hope I had built over the past year, all the careful bridge building and generous giving had been for nothing, worse than nothing. I had been used deliberately and callously by the people who were supposed to love me most. After what seemed like hours, I dragged myself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The woman in the mirror looked hollow, shattered. I called the airline and canceled my flight. Then I called Jessica. She arrived at my apartment an hour later with coffee and pastries I could not eat. I showed her the messages as tears continued to slide silently down my face. This is beyond belief, she said, her voice tight with anger. They took advantage of your generosity in the most calculated way possible. I gave them everything, I whispered. A house, financial security, this vacation. I thought it would make them finally see me, finally include me. You cannot buy love from people incapable of giving it, Jessica said gently, and you deserve so much better than this. We spent the day together, Jessica canceling her appointments to stay with me as I cycled through waves of grief, shock, and anger. By evening, the reality of my situation had fully sunk in. They are using my money to exclude me, I said, staring into the cup of tea Jessica had made me. They are literally on a vacation I paid for, living in a house I bought them, while texting me that I am not family. What are you going to do? Jessica asked. I looked up at her, something hardening inside me. I do not know yet. But I am done being their personal bank. I am done begging for scraps of affection in exchange for financial support. That night after Jessica left, I received a series of photos from my father, the family boarding the flight to Seattle, all smiles and excitement. He had captioned it, "Wish you were here." The casual cruelty of that message, the complete lack of self-awareness, crystallized something for me. I made myself a cup of strong coffee and opened my laptop. It was time to take stock of exactly what I had given them and what legal options I had moving forward. The house was still in my name. The cruise had been paid for with my credit card. The spending money, nearly $5,000, had been transferred from my account to theirs. I had documentation for everything. As the night deepened, my shock gave way to clarity. This was not a new pattern, but the culmination of a lifetime of emotional manipulation. I had been trying to buy my way into a family that fundamentally did not want me as an equal member. No amount of money or generosity would ever change that essential truth. By morning, I had made my decision. They would learn that their actions had consequences. Significant ones. I called my attorney. Lawrence Keller had been my attorney since I purchased my first commercial property. He was in his early 60s with a direct manner and meticulous attention to detail that had served me well over the years. I called him from my home office the morning after receiving the text that changed everything. "Angelique," he greeted me. "What can I do for you today?" I explained the situation, keeping my voice steady despite the emotions still swirling within me. I detailed the house purchase, the cruise payments, and the explicit rejection I had received. "I want to know my legal options regarding the house," I concluded. "It is still in my name." Lawrence was silent for a moment. "Let me confirm a few details. The property is titled solely to you, correct? There was no formal gift declaration filed with the IRS. Correct. I intended to transfer it to them eventually, but had not done so yet. And they have no written lease agreement with you. Number, nothing formal at all. Then, legally speaking, they are essentially tenants at will in a property you own. You have the right to sell it if you choose to do so, even with their belongings inside. That complicates things, Lawrence admitted. We would need to provide reasonable accommodation for them to retrieve their personal property. However, given that they are currently out of the country for 2 weeks, you have time to consider your options and proceed carefully. We discussed various approaches from formal eviction notices to negotiated settlements. Lawrence advised caution and documentation of everything. "Whatever you decide," he said, "make sure it is a choice you can live with long term. Family disputes can have lasting consequences beyond the legal implications." "They made their choice," I replied, a new steadiness in my voice. "Now I am making mine." After ending the call, I sat with my thoughts for several hours. Was I prepared to take such a drastic step? Would selling the house, while they were away, be crossing a moral line, even if it was legally permissible? I thought about Brittany's gloating text, about my mother's cold voice informing me I was not family, about my father's decades of passive acceptance of my exclusion. I thought about the $400,000 I had spent to provide them security only to be discarded the moment I had served my purpose. By afternoon, my decision was made. I called Sandra Maxwell, a realtor I had worked with in Florida on several investment properties. "I need to list a property for sale immediately," I told her, "and I need it sold before the current occupants return in 2 weeks. Sandra was professional enough not to ask too many questions. "That is an extremely tight timeline even in this market. Are you willing to price aggressively to ensure a quick sale?" "Yes. Market value is around $420,000. I will accept $400,000 for a cash buyer who can close quickly." "I might have several investors who would be interested at that price point," she said. "Let me make some calls." Over the next 48 hours, I made arrangements to fly to Florida. I contacted a locksmith to meet me at the property and change all locks. I hired a moving company to carefully pack and place my parents' belongings in storage. I arranged for security cameras to be installed discreetly to record their eventual return. Before leaving Chicago, I drafted formal letters to both my parents and Brittany outlining exactly why I was taking these actions. I did not send them yet, but having the words written down helped solidify my resolve. I arrived in Florida 3 days after they had departed for their cruise. Sandra met me at the house with paperwork ready for my signature. She had already found 2 potential buyers willing to meet my price and timeline. "Both are cash buyers," she explained. "One is an investor who flips properties in this community. The other is a couple relocating from New York who fell in love with the neighborhood." "The couple," I said immediately. "I want this to be someone's home, not an investment property." The next morning, I met Michael and Tamara Bailey, the New York couple. They were in their 50s, empty nesters looking for their retirement home. They fell in love with the property immediately and agreed to my terms without negotiation. Sandra expedited the paperwork and they signed a purchase agreement that same day, offering $415,000 in cash with a 7-day closing period. With the sale in progress, I turned my attention to my parents' belongings. The moving company arrived the following day, and I supervised as they carefully packed everything. I created a detailed inventory photographing valuable items and ensuring nothing was damaged. All items were transported to a climate-controlled storage facility with 6 months of prepaid rent. I kept only one thing, a small family photo that had sat on my father's nightstand. It showed the four of us at my college graduation, one of the few moments where we had appeared like a normal, happy family. I slipped it into my bag, a reminder of the illusion I had believed for too long. The locksmith changed all exterior locks and provided me with the new keys. The security company installed discreet cameras at the front entrance and back patio with footage accessible through a secure app on my phone. 5 days after my arrival in Florida, the sale closed. The Baileys received their keys, and $415,000 was wired to my account. I provided them with my contact information in case of any issues, but explained that the previous occupants had relocated and would not be returning. That evening, I sat in my hotel room and finalized the letters I had drafted. To my parents, I wrote, Diana and Martin, by the time you read this, the house will have been sold. Your belongings are in storage at Secure Storage on Palm Avenue Unit 247. I have paid for 6 months of storage fees. The access code is 7294. When you excluded me from the family vacation that I paid for you, made it abundantly clear that I am not considered family. I have accepted this reality and am acting accordingly. The house was in my name, and as such, it was mine to sell. I have transferred $20,000 to your bank account, which should be sufficient for temporary accommodations until you decide on your next steps. This will be the final financial assistance you receive from me. Consider this the conclusion of our relationship on the terms you have established. Angelique. To Brittany, I wrote a shorter note. Enjoy your real family time. The house is gone. Do not contact me again. Angelique. I scheduled these letters to be delivered by courier on the day of their scheduled return. With everything in place, I flew back to Chicago and tried to prepare myself emotionally for what would come next. I knew there would be rage accusations, perhaps even legal threats, but for the first time in my life, I felt completely justified in my actions. They had drawn the line between us, not me. I was simply acknowledging the boundary they had created and responding accordingly. The night before their scheduled return, I sat in my apartment looking out over the Chicago skyline. Jessica called to check on me. Are you ready for tomorrow? She asked. Yes, I replied, surprised by the calm in my voice. For the first time in my life, I am not seeking their approval or acceptance. I am simply standing up for myself. I am proud of you, she said softly. This cannot be easy. Actually, it is the easiest decision I have ever made. They showed me who they really are, and I believed them. Everything else follows from that truth. As I hung up, I felt a weight lifting that I'd carried for as long as I could remember. Tomorrow would bring chaos, but it would also bring the beginning of freedom from a pattern that had controlled my life for too long. The security cameras captured my parents' return on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. I watched the footage remotely from my Chicago apartment, my heart pounding despite my resolve. A taxi dropped them off luggage in tow stand and smiling from their cruise. My father approached the door, first key in hand. His confusion when it did not work was evident even on the grainy footage. He tried again, then stepped back to examine the lock more closely. My mother joined him, attempting her own key, then knocking loudly. After several minutes of growing agitation, my father walked around to try the back door while my mother pulled out her phone. I braced myself as my own phone rang moments later. What is going on? Diana demanded without preamble. Our keys do not work. The locks have been changed, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. You should be receiving a courier delivery shortly that will explain everything. Explain what? This is our house. Why would you change the locks? It is not your house, I said firmly. It never was. The house was in my name and I have sold it. There was a moment of complete silence, then an explosion of incoherent shouting. I held the phone away from my ear until the volume decreased enough for me to make out words again. You cannot do this, she was saying. Our things, all our belongings. Your belongings are in storage. All the details are in the letter you will receive. The new owners will be stopping by this evening to make sure you have vacated the premises. If you have not, they are authorized to call the police. I am calling your father, she hissed, and the line went dead. Martin called 3 minutes later, his voice shaking with an emotion I had rarely heard from him, genuine anger. Angel, what have you done? he asked. "How could you do this to us?" "How could I do this to you?" I repeated, feeling a surge of my own anger. "How could you exclude me from a vacation I paid for? How could you tell me I am not family after I bought you a $400,000 house?" "That was your mother's idea," he said quickly. "I wanted you there, but you know how she gets. I cannot oppose her when she makes up her mind." "You never could," I agreed. "Not when she favored Brittany. Not when she criticized me for everything I ever did. Not when she told me I was not family. You had opportunities to stand up for me my entire life, and you never took a single one. So this is punishment. Leaving us homeless. You are not homeless. I transferred $20,000 to your account. That should cover temporary accommodations while you figure out your next steps. And no, this is not punishment. This is a natural consequence of your choices. You both made it clear I am not family, so I am no longer providing the financial support that family might expect." I could hear Diana in the background, her voice rising with each word. My father covered the phone briefly, then came back on the line. "We need to talk about this in person," he said. "This is a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding." Mom's text was perfectly clear, as was Brittany's. "I am not family. So the house that I bought that was in my name has been sold to a lovely couple who will appreciate it." The courier arrived, then I could hear the exchange in the background. The call ended abruptly, as they presumably opened the letters I had sent. They called back 17 times over the next 2 hours. I did not answer. Brittany called 39 times, leaving increasingly hysterical voicemails accusing me of destroying their lives and demanding I fix this immediately. By evening, the messages had evolved from rage to negotiation. "We can work this out," my father texted. "Please call us back. I know you are upset about the cruise," my mother wrote, "but this is extreme, we can talk about it." I replied to none of them, holding firm to my decision. The security footage showed them eventually leaving in another taxi, presumably to a hotel. The Baileys arrived an hour later, cautiously checking that the property was indeed vacant. 3 days passed. The messages continued but decreased in frequency. On the 4th day, I received a text from my father asking to meet. Alone. I agreed to a video call, not yet ready to see him in person. When his face appeared on my screen, I was surprised by how much older he looked than just a few weeks before. The cruise had not been kind to him. "I never meant to hurt you," he began. "And yet you did," I replied, repeatedly, for years. "Your mother is difficult, you know that, but she does love you in her own way." "Her own way is not love at all. It is conditional approval based on what I can provide, followed by rejection the moment I expect to be treated with basic dignity." He sighed heavily. "I should have stood up to her more. I should have been a better father." "Yes, you should have. Can we fix this? Can we find a way forward?" I considered his question seriously. "I do not know. I am not interested in a relationship where I provide financial support and receive emotional scraps in return. That dynamic is over permanently." "And the house? Is that decision final?" "The house is sold, the new owners are living in it, that cannot be undone." He nodded slowly. "We are staying with Brittany for now. It Island, challenging." I felt a momentary twinge of sympathy, but pushed it aside. "You have options with the money I provided." That was more generosity than I received from any of you. The call ended shortly after with nothing resolved but perhaps a tiny opening for future conversations, at least with my father. 2 weeks later, I agreed to meet my parents at a restaurant in Chicago Neutral Territory where we could talk face to face. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table and ordering a glass of wine to steady my nerves. They arrived together looking diminished somehow. Diana had always carried herself with rigid posture and immaculate presentation. Now she seemed deflated, her usual armor missing. Martin walked slightly behind her as always, but his typical passivity had been replaced with something almost like resolve. As they approached the table, Diana spoke first. "This was unnecessary," she said by way of greeting. "You have made your point." "This was not about making a point," I replied calmly. "It was about establishing boundaries and consequences. By making us homeless, by punishing us for wanting some time with our daughter and grandchildren. I did not make you homeless. I sold a house that was legally mine after you made it clear I was not considered family. And it was never about you spending time with Brittany. It was about deliberately excluding me from a trip I had planned and paid for. Diana opened her mouth to respond, but Martin placed a hand on her arm, surprising both of us. Diana, stop, he said firmly. We were wrong. What we did was cruel and ungrateful, and Angelique had every right to respond as she did. My mother stared at him as if he had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. In all my life, I had never heard him contradict her so directly. We had an arrangement, she hissed. No, you had a plan, he corrected. You and Brittany decided Angelique was showing off with her money and needed to be put in her place. You manipulated me into going along with it, as you always have. But I am done with that. He turned to me, his eyes clearer than I had seen them in years. I failed you as a father. I allowed your mother and sister to treat you as less than to take advantage of your generosity and to exclude you when it suited them. I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I am asking anyway. The restaurant seemed to fade away as I processed his words. This was the father I had glimpsed occasionally throughout my life, the man I had always hoped existed beneath the passive exterior. I appreciate that I said carefully, but words need to be followed by actions to have meaning. I know, he nodded, which is why I have rented an apartment separate from your mother and Brittany. I need to figure out who I am without allowing Diana to make all my decisions. Diana gasped, You cannot be serious. After 40 years of marriage, I am not filing for divorce, he clarified. I am taking space to reevaluate everything, including how we have treated our daughter. The dinner that followed was tense, but surprisingly productive. Diana oscillated between defensive anger and reluctant acknowledgement of her role in what had happened. Martin spoke more openly than I had ever heard him, admitting patterns of behavior that had damaged our family for decades. By the time we parted ways, nothing was resolved, but something had shifted. The power dynamic that had defined our relationship had been fundamentally altered. I was no longer the daughter desperately seeking approval. I was a woman who had set clear boundaries and was prepared to enforce them regardless of the cost. I do not know what comes next, I told them as we stood outside the restaurant. But I do know, it cannot be what was before. We will find a way forward, my father said, even if it takes time. My mother said nothing, but the look in her eyes had changed from outrage to something more complex. Perhaps for the first time she was seeing me as I truly was, not as the daughter she had tried to mold me into being. As their taxi pulled away, I felt neither triumph nor regret, but rather a profound sense of having finally claimed my own worth after decades of allowing others to define it for me. The months following our confrontation dinner brought changes I could never have predicted. My father moved into a small apartment near their old neighborhood in Boston. He called weekly, our conversations gradually evolving from awkward pauses to genuine exchanges. For the first time in my life, I felt I was getting to know him as a person, not just as the passive figure who had orbited my mother throughout my childhood. I joined a men's support group, he told me during one call. Most of them are going through divorces or separations, but they accepted me anyway. That is great, Dad, I said, genuinely pleased. How is it going? Hard, he admitted. Talking about feelings does not come naturally to me, but it is helping. I am learning about codependency and enabling behaviors, terms I never knew applied to me. These small revelations accumulated over time, creating a tentative bridge between us. He sent me an email on my birthday with a heartfelt apology for all the times he had failed to protect me from Diana's favoritism. The sincerity of his words brought tears to my eyes, not because they erased the past, but because they acknowledged it honestly. My mother maintained radio silence for nearly 3 months. According to my father, she was living with Brittany's family, an arrangement that was proving difficult for everyone involved. Brittany's husband, Mark, had apparently objected to the open-ended nature of the living situation, causing increasing tension in their household. I focused on my own healing during this time. Weekly sessions with a therapist helped me process the complex emotions surrounding my family dynamics. I joined a support group for adult children of emotionally unavailable parents, finding solace in the shared experiences of others who understood the particular pain of conditional love. Jessica remained my steadfast supporter, joining me for dinners, and weekend hiking trips when work stress threatened to overwhelm me. During one such hike in the autumn, as we watched leaves drift down around us in brilliant shades of red and gold, she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you regret selling the house?" I considered this carefully before answering. Of number, I regret that it came to that point. I regret that they made choices that forced my hand, but the decision itself? No, I do not regret it. "You seem different," she observed, lighter somehow. "I feel different," I agreed. For the first time in my life, I am not carrying the weight of trying to earn their love. I am not making myself smaller to fit into the box they created for me. This new sense of freedom extended to other areas of my life. I pursued interests I had previously set aside due to work demands, taking sailing lessons on Lake Michigan and joining a book club focused on memoirs. I reconnected with college friends I had lost touch with, nurturing relationships based on mutual respect rather than need or obligation. 6 months after the confrontation, my phone rang with my mother's ringtone for the first time since that day. I almost did not answer, but curiosity won out. "Angelique." Her voice sounded different, less certain than I remembered. "How are you?" "I am well," I replied neutrally. "What can I do for you, Mom?" A pause. "Brittany has asked us to find our own place. Mark feels the house is too crowded." Of course, she was calling because she needed something. The familiar pattern threatened to reassert itself, but I held firm to my new boundaries. "I see. What are your plans?" I was hoping we might discuss financial arrangements. Your father is barely managing on his pension, and with the market in Boston. Mom, I interrupted gently, I am not in a position to purchase another property for you. I am not asking for that, she said quickly. Though we both knew that had been exactly her intention. Perhaps a loan. Just until we can get back on our feet. I do not think that would be healthy for our relationship. Another long pause. Are we to be punished forever then? This is not punishment. This is me declining to resume a dynamic that was destructive for all of us. I am happy to help you research affordable housing options or connect you with financial advisors, but I will not be providing direct financial support. The conversation ended shortly after, with my mother clearly disappointed but unable to argue against the logic of my position. It was the first of several similar calls over the following weeks, each one ending the same way. Gradually, her requests became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Almost a year after the cruise incident, my father called with unexpected news. "Your mother has taken a job," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. "At a boutique in their neighborhood, part-time sales associate." "That is unexpected," I replied, trying to imagine Diana, who had always defined herself by not needing to work after marriage, standing behind a counter serving customers. "She says she likes it," he continued. "The employee discount on clothing is a particular perk, apparently." This small step toward self-sufficiency marked a turning point. When my mother called the following week, it was not to ask for money, but to tell me about a difficult customer she had successfully managed. The conversation was stilted but lacked the underlying tension of our previous exchanges. 13 months after I sold the house, I agreed to meet both my parents for dinner during a business trip to Boston. They had rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a senior living community, using the remainder of the money I had provided after the house sale. My father had taken a part-time job as a shuttle driver for the community, supplementing his pension income. The apartment was simply furnished but neat, with photographs on the walls that surprised me. Among family pictures of Brittany and her children were several of me at various stages of life, including recent ones taken from my social media accounts. "We are trying," my mother said, following my gaze to the photos. "I know it may be too little too late, but we are trying." Dinner was a quiet affair, none of us quite comfortable enough for easy conversation, but all making an effort. As we finished dessert, my mother disappeared into the bedroom and returned with a small gift bag. "This is long overdue," she said, placing it before me. Inside was a silver frame containing a photo I had never seen before. It showed me at about 5 years old, sitting on my father's shoulders at what appeared to be a county fair, both of us laughing with unrestrained joy. "I found it when we were packing," she explained. I had forgotten it existed. The photo captured something I had also forgotten: that there had been moments of genuine connection and love within our complicated family history. Not enough to excuse what came later, but perhaps enough to build upon if we were all willing to do the necessary work. "Thank you," I said simply. As the evening drew to a close, my father walked me to my rental car. "We have learned valuable lessons," he said. "Painful ones, but necessary. I want you to know that regardless of what happens between you and your mother going forward, I am committed to being a better father. Not because of financial considerations, but because I love you and always have, even when I failed to show it properly." Tears pricked my eyes as I hugged him, feeling the frailty in his frame that had not been there before. "One day at a time," I told him. "That is all any of us can do." The journey of healing with my family continues with steps forward and occasional steps back. Brittany remains distant, unwilling to acknowledge her role in what happened or to engage in the difficult work of rebuilding trust. My relationship with my parents is forever changed, more honest in its limitations, but also in its possibilities. The most profound change, however, has been within myself. I no longer measure my worth by their approval or acceptance. I have built a life rich with meaningful connections to friends who value me for exactly who I am. I have learned that true family can be those we choose, not just those we are born to. The house in Florida, which once represented my desperate attempt to buy belonging, now serves as a reminder that self-respect is not negotiable. The new owners send me Christmas cards each year, their joy in the home bringing me a satisfaction that ownership never did. Some might see my actions as extreme, but I know they were necessary for my own healing and growth. By setting firm boundaries and allowing natural consequences to unfold, I gave us all the opportunity to build something new from the ashes of old patterns. If there is one lesson I have learned through this journey, it is that true family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by love and respect freely given. We cannot force others to treat us with dignity, but we can absolutely decide what treatment we will accept. Sometimes the most powerful statement of self-worth is simply walking away from those who cannot see your value. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own well-being, even at the cost of family relationships? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember that setting boundaries is not selfish, it is essential for healthy relationships. If my story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, you deserve to be valued for exactly who you are, not what you can provide for others.